Hi everybody. So we just finished reading The Tiny King, and now we're going to read The Big Princess. Remember, the big princess came into the story with the tiny king and they had lots of children. So let's see what happens in this book. Once upon a time, in a land far, far away, there lived a king and a queen. The king and queen had no children of their own, but they had a beautiful garden, full of all kinds of flowers. It was their pride and joy, and each blossom was tended with the greatest love and care. One night, a white bird came to the king in his dreams. It had a message for him. "You and your queen will be sent a child," the bird said. "Go to your garden when you wake. There, among the flowers, you will find a princess as sweet and charming as your most cherished blossom. But be warned, the princess is under a spell. If you're able to break this spell, the princess will become your true daughter. If not, your kingdom will fall and be lost forever." And when the morning came, the king remembered his strange dream. Could it be true? He leaped out of bed and ran to his garden. He searched high and low, but the princess was nowhere to be found. It was just a dream after all. His heart was heavy, which means he was sad. But then he heard a little voice, "Your Majesty." And the king turned around, and there on a little leaf was a lovely tiny princess. Very carefully the king placed the princess in his hand, and he carried her all the way to the queen. When the queen saw the tiny princess, she was overjoyed. Then the king told her about his dream. What spell could this princess be under? And if they failed to break it, what would happen to the kingdom? But the more the queen looked at the perfectly lovely little princess, the more she could not believe it. Look how little she is. Do you see how tiny? The happy queen wanted to prepare a bed for her tiny princess right away. But what kind of bed would she sleep in? The princess was so little. Then the queen had an idea. She pulled a feather out of her crown and laid the princess on it. The tiny princess floated up and down on her fluffy, feathery bed. And the next morning, to everyone's surprise, the princess had grown and the feather bed was too small for her. Look how little she is on that feather. But remember, she grew too big for it, and she had to find another bed. So she found a ring box, and the sparkly box was the perfect bed. But the next day, oh no, the princess had grown again. And now the ring box bed was too small for her. And the queen had to look again. And this time she found her favorite teacup. She filled it with soft, fluffy cotton, and what a wonderful bed it was for the little princess. Until the next day, when the little princess had grown again, now even the teacup bed was too small for her. So the queen had to search again and found a new bed once more. What is she sleeping on this time? A cuddly teddy bear. The teddy bear's tummy was soft and warm, and the little princess was very, very cozy. But To everyone's surprise, as the day went by, she got bigger, and she kept growing until she was too big for a children's bed. In fact, every single bed made for the little princess became way too small the very next day. So that means she kept growing and growing and growing. Now, no one had ever heard of such a thing. The princess kept growing bigger and bigger. Soon, she was even taller than the king and the queen. How much was she going to grow? What do they look like? How do they look? They look worried. Oh no! The poor princess was now almost too big for the castle. She cried and her tears were giant, and they would fall to the ground and it would flood. Then the king remembered his dream. Remember, there was a spell and he had to break it? Together, he tried to break the spell. But no matter what they did, nothing worked. And that made her feel very sad. The king had no choice. He had to move his princess to the tallest tower in the castle. Even then, she kept growing bigger and bigger and bigger. And the tower started to bulge and the walls began to crack. Boom! The top of the tower bursted open. And the king wrung his hands in despair. I can't give up, he thought. I have to save my daughter. And with hope in his heart, he looked up at his giant princess, and that's when he seen it. There in the tower window, it was the princess's belly button. And something was tucked inside of it. Something shiny. There's her belly button. I wonder what it is. So he had to get a ladder and he had to crawl all the way to the top of the tower. And when the king got to the tower window, he reached out for the shiny object. And as he did, he tickled the princess's tummy. The princess giggled and the tower rocked back and forth. Any moment now, the tower was going to fall down. Pop! And out of the princess's belly button dropped a shiny black seed. Right into the king's hand. Guess what happened next? The princess suddenly grew smaller and smaller. He fixed her. That's how the king broke the spell, and he and his family lived happily ever after. Now, is she still bigger than her mom and dad, the king and queen? Yep, she's still very big, but she's not as big as she was. Look at this. Remember, look how tall she was. Even the tallest tower was too small for her. Although the princess was now a lot smaller, she was still a little bigger than the average princess. And what of the shiny black seed? Well, they planted it in the castle garden, and it grew into giant flowers, which soon would be a giant field of flowers. They had lots of them. The people of the kingdom called the flowers big princesses, and to this day they tend to them with much love and much care. The end. That was such a good story about the big princess. She was enormous. I hope you guys enjoyed that story. I'll see you guys later.